intelligencesquared.com.
Okay, panel, you've heard a variety of points that come from the audience. This issue of whether you support things like extraordinary rendition, whereby you take a terror suspect and send them to a third country, another country to be interrogated, given the example of the recent example of the Tripoli military commander. And if you would incorporate these, and we have to do it in reverse order, which means, Dr. Bergner-Kushner, you will be making your closing arguments in 2 minutes. Yes, please. And at the same time, the panel, the audience will be voting to see where they stand on the motion.
It was a long period, and we cannot redraw history. I believe that this is uneasy, as I told you, to go to the civil society, not to go to war immediately, to try to get the confidence of the people, to develop economy, etc. It takes decades and decades. But we have to do that. We have to give an example, because just to, let's say, to avoid military people and after some months or even before appear to the people like an occupation force is not the good way. I didn't say that we didn't have to react against 9/11. But the lesson learned from the Soviet war in Pakistan, not in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, but of course it was mixed. And the lesson everywhere is that the military solution is not possible. Yes, I'm in favor of international law, of course. Yes, I'm not in favor of rebuilding UN system, because it will be difficult. Even with that one, it's difficult to work. But the answer, the final argument is that we were looking for Muslim people, let's say, reacting against dictatorship. And we found them. We found them in the 3 countries you were quoted. And not only there, you will see. And this is the beginning of something. Yes, we have to let's say, to authorize, I don't know, or to set up a Palestinian state. Yes, we have to do so, but it takes years and years, and this is very difficult, and this is my conclusion. You know, I've been a human rights fighter for 40 years. This is not exactly the same that being a foreign minister. Believe me, what is much more difficult is to be a foreign minister.
Okay, thank you. Audience, I should remind you, actually, as you're voting now, on the motion, the war on terror was the right response to 9/11. If you're for the motion, tear that off, put that in the box. If you're against, put that on. And if you're still undecided and don't know, just put the whole ticket untorn into the boxes. All right, arguing for the motion, Colleen Graffy, please, your closing arguments incorporating some of those points, the objectives of the war on terror, where you stand on interrogation and rendition.
I take a point from you in looking at history. When Mussolini invaded Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, the League of Nations voted 54-0 that he had to get out, he had to be thwarted, it had to be stopped. They understood what needed to be done to ensure international security, but they didn't have the willpower to do it. The result was that the League of Nations collapsed, Mussolini stayed where he was, and Hitler was watching. In this war on terror, it's not enough to say that we can look the other way and that law enforcement is enough. It had been tried and it failed, and it sent the signal, just as the League of Nations did, that we weren't willing to do anything, that we weren't willing to stand up for our security. Now, military isn't just military. As I said, it gives you the full spectrum. You can't try and reduce poverty and illiteracy when you can't build schools and hospitals, and you can't do that unless you have the military. Now, I know there's bad news up and down, as President Musharraf has said. We shouldn't look at just the peaks and the troughs. We need to look at, was it the right decision overall? And as French Prime Minister Clemenceau said, he defined war as a series of catastrophes that end in victory. So the war on terror is no different. There's a lot of mistakes that have been made. There's a long road ahead, but the result is going to be, hopefully, a victory not only for the people in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also throughout the Middle East that will give that oxygen to extinguish that flame that is radicalizing people and turning them towards terrorism.
Thank you. Against the motion, your closing arguments, Jeremy Greenstock.
I think we've heard from the proponents of this motion this evening just why the rhetoric of the war on terror has been such a diversion, such a distortion in this incredibly dramatic and changing 10 years that we're looking at. I'm afraid that Al-Qaeda and terrorism has not been the greatest threat to our societies over the last 10 years. The health of the global and the national economies have been much more important than that. The health of the developing world has been more important than that. The health of civil society has been more important than that. Was it the job of the military action to make our countries safer? Nobody's making the world safer. Yes, it was, and military action was necessary. But thinking that this was just a war missed the point that terrorism grows within our own societies. It comes from social diseases within our own communities. And the policing and the economic policies and the environmental policies that have to go along with the military action are the most important things that a government has to put together. Is the UN any use in doing this? Yes, it is, if governments can agree, because the UN sets the norms, the legitimacy, the arguments for a decent society, for a collective approach to global problems that no other institution in this world can do. We have to put these things together, and the focus on war, on American national interest, distorted that proper approach. That's what we're trying to say on this side of the argument.
General Musharraf, your closing arguments.
Yes, please. I have already said that we have to take a very holistic view of fighting terrorism. And I have said that it has three facets: the military, political, and socio-economic. But we also have to see this from the short-term, mid-term, and long-term perspective. I personally believe when we apply the military or the force, or we use physical force against terror, it is in the short-term perspective. But it is the key to success in the other domain of political and socio-economic. And I totally agree with Colleen that unless you create an environment to be able to use the political and socio-economic instrument, you will not succeed in the war against terror. So therefore, the military creates the environment, and it is in the short-term perspective. Then, in the mid-term perspective, you take the political element. And when we are talking of the people who attacked the World Trade Center being educated, it was the political dispute which probably motivated them to do whatever they did. And that was the Palestine-Israeli dispute, which needs to be resolved. Then comes the long-term perspective, and that is the socio-economic perspective. You cannot go for education and poverty alleviation in the short term. It will take many decades to convert a society and educate a society and counter poverty in a society. So therefore, one cannot argue that poverty alleviation or education is the answer to fighting terrorism. So you have to, first of all, counter terrorism with force, with military force, especially when a government is abetting terrorists in their society. When they are harboring terrorists, then it is a war against that state. So therefore, military use or war against terror creates the environment to use the political instrument and also the socio-economic. The last point that I want to make is that terrorism, I believe, is a symptom, whereas the cause is the political disputes. So while we address the symptom through military use and force and launch a war against it, we must go to the cause through political resolution and poverty alleviation and education. So this is the holistic view that I take.
Thank you very much indeed, Pervez Musharraf, there for your closing arguments. And now we are waiting for the results of your vote, audience. Not ready yet, we are still counting. So let's just pick up then, panel, the point made by the representative from the Quilliam Foundation, which I think was mostly to your side, Mr. Musharraf and Colleen Graffley, which was, when you support the war on terror, do you support detention without charge? Do you support rendition and the invasion of countries without proper UN authorization?
Well, the question had several different parts. The first is torture, no. That is not allowed. The international community has torture convention, but every country is going to, as Britain has done, is going to find ways of interrogation that come pretty close. And in the United States, the view was that the actions taken in waterboarding were not torture. Now, you can disagree with that.
Well, a lot of people did. I mean, it's what you described as enhanced interrogation procedures.
And they stopped that, and they considered that it was wrong to do, okay? The other, with detention, every country is dealing with the difficulty, the tensions between protecting societies and protecting civil rights. So the UK is in the same situation. Control orders, how long do you hold people? Right. France has a similar situation.
Okay, and so Jeremy, the question to your side from the Quilliam Foundation was, what do you do to empower civil society? What's the alternative to the war on terror? How would you have done it?
Well, civil society is actually doing more than governments, in my view, at the moment, to make the developing world a better place, village by village, town by town, region by region. They don't need to be told what to do by governments. They don't need to be empowered in what they have the will to achieve in the less advantaged areas of the world. But they do need to work with the governments of the developing world to be allowed access to the people who need their help. And when you get that kind of partnership between what the West in its donor mode can give and what the developing world can absorb and receive and act on, you are getting a partnership that does far more to deal with security issues than the direct use of military force. That's what we're trying to say.
Okay, and Bernard Kouchner, I've got the result now of the, thank you very much for that, Sir Jeremy Greenstock. I've got the result now of the vote after the debate, and it's very interesting. All right, let me, first of all, remind you how you voted, audience, before the debate started. For the motion, the war on terror was the right response to 9/11, 179 for, 323 against. There were 200 of you who didn't know. So after the debate, this is how you voted. For the motion, the war on terror was the right response, 276, so you did gain some. Against, however, 402. And the don't knows went down to 46. So congratulations to the winners. Commiserations. But you did add to your tally, but they added many more. So thank you very much indeed, panel. Thank you, audience, here at Cadogan Hall in central London, and you at home, wherever you are, for watching. And you can get a free briefing if you want to by going to the website www.intelligencesquared.com and just follow the instructions there. But for me, Zainab Badawi, from this Intelligence Squared debate marking this important occasion of the 10th anniversary of the September the 11th attacks, thank you very much. Goodbye.